Welcome to Planet People Mining Season 2. I'm your host, Allison Koppel. Here we present the stories of trailblazers at the crossroads of mining, sustainability, and communities. Hear what motivates top professionals in this field of impactful work. Accompany them as they describe their challenges and explore the issues they tackle. And for our Spanish-speaking audience, busca Planet People Mining en español. Understanding Economic Impact Place by Place with Maulik Doshi. Today I speak with Maulik Doshi, Managing Director for the firm Steward Redqueen. We speak about Steward Redqueen's experience in helping the mining industry communicate transparently and through clear criteria its local economic impact for projects and operations, and how powerful this knowledge is for building social acceptance. Maulik's career is a story of transition, of how to apply quantitative rigor and technology for greater positive impacts across different sectors, from mortgage finance at Freddie Mac to the private equity behemoth Blackrock, and now as head of Steward Redqueen's U.S. office based in Washington, D.C. He is originally from India and calls Northern Virginia home. He holds a bachelor's degree in finance from James Madison University and an MBA from American University. Maulik, so good to have you on the podcast. Why don't you introduce yourself beyond what I shared in the bio? What are a few major life and work milestones?
Great to be here with you, Allison, and I'm super excited to have the opportunity to connect with you and your audience and the work that you're doing to promote the work that you're doing and the organization that you've started. And congratulations to you for all the efforts. I'm sure the getting into the entrepreneurial world is exciting for you. So great to be part of your journey. A quick background on myself. I am a long-time Washington, D.C. area resident. I've been here for more than half my life. I'm a husband and father of two, and I immigrated here from India, but when I was a very young child. And so I feel like I've assimilated quite well into the American life and the American lifestyle. I grew up outside of Richmond, Virginia for most of my formative years, if you will. I love live music. But from a career perspective, I've had a really fun and interesting journey over the years. I started my career in kind of the hardcore world of mortgage finance. And back in the 1990s, when the big mortgage giants, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, were growing into kind of the larger platforms that they've become over the years and really working kind of in the deep analytics space, really trying to understand and quantify the value and risk in investing in mortgage securities. And so I turned that into a love for kind of all things at the intersection of finance and technology, then moved to Blackrock, the large global asset manager. We were a much smaller boutique manager when I started back in the early 2000s, but also was given the opportunity there to be at very much at the intersection of capital markets and technology. And so that was also a wonderful experience. I was there for almost 20 years, watching the organization grow into kind of the platform and the behemoth that will ultimately become a great organization with great leadership and great opportunity to do wonderful things in the world. But have recently left and have joined a small, neat boutique consultancy called Steward Redqueen most recently. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, already, to my listeners, you're probably wondering, okay, he's talked about mortgage, he's talked about finance and tech. When are we getting to Planet People Mining? But it's coming. But already I'm starting to hear a threat because BlackRock, it's interesting to ever think about BlackRock in terms of a boutique firm, but I guess it had to start as a boutique firm. Mm-hmm. And it's a major investor in the mining industry. So there's already one intersection. And already as a precursor to what I assume we're about to get into, this concept of leveraging finance and technology to help people find value, I have a feeling is going to come up in your current work. So, why don't you talk to us a little bit about Steward Redqueen?
So, as part of the journey at Blackrock, much of my time was very much focused on figuring out how helping others could be kind of part of my day to day. And although at times I found that opportunity at Blackrock, I often looked elsewhere also to kind of help think through where I can build my understanding, my expertise about making an impact. And what I found, Steward Red Queen, I really think I found the perfect intersection of an organization that really focuses on one thing and one thing only, which is really their mantra, which they call making business work for society. And that mantra and that approach and mindset to how they think about their organization was something that very much spoke to me. And I can't thank the leadership team at Steward Red Queen enough for the opportunity to join them. With that, certainly the context around working on opportunities with corporations, specifically clients that are in this space, the mining space, like Newmont, which we worked with several years ago, have been very unique and very interesting opportunities for us to work with organizations that may have a real message to deliver to officials around the world around the impact that they're making. Although they focus, the businesses themselves focus on extracting of key mineral around the world, we want to be able to help them build a narrative and understand kind of the value and the impact that they're making through the work that they do. And so that is the crux of the dialogue that we have with our clients and ultimately helping them tell those stories.
And I got to know Steward Redqueen through the work at Newmont. Saw when I came into Newmont, the work was already underway in Ghana, and it was so powerful. And when you say impact, just to clarify, for the most part, you're talking about the economic impact.
It's a will do, and especially in the context of Newmont, we certainly talked about economic impact. What is the value of that organization's business activities or commercial activities in a particular jurisdiction? So it can be in any nation in the world, and we dive into very specific geographies. We can look at a business across business lines, but it is typically very much focused on economic.
Yeah, to me, it was so powerful because I've seen companies over years come up with a high level metric. I mean, one of the first social metrics a company will come up with is how many jobs it's going to create through this project. When I say company, meaning mining company. And then might go one step further and start to estimate maybe how much taxes it will pay or how much economic benefit through the local supply chain. And then it just kind of gets fuzzy from there. And I was so impressed with what Steward Redqueen was doing at the time at Newmont was that it brought transparency into the process, rigor into the process, so that when we were able to share that this mining investment is really bringing this much economic value to the country level and to the local level, we could really back that story up and tell that story, really tell the story through the numbers of not just this is the number of local suppliers or a percent of local spend, but tell that story in a lot more detail where it held us accountable, it engaged communities in meaningful dialogue, and it brought a level of credibility to our work that prior to there was a gap. And so then we, of course, we replicated this model through a number of our other sites. And in each jurisdiction, from Colorado to other countries and other states in the US, it was very powerful. And so I always had my eye on the work that you do. And then, of course, you guys work across a number of sectors, but mining in particular, we say in mining, you can't pick where the ore is. The ore is where it is. Your mine is going to be there.
Yep.
No? And I would venture to say I haven't seen any other methodology that matches what I've seen you all deliver. So to hear your story of how you've brought your personal career from different sectors and then landed here to apply all that learning, I find fascinating.
Well, I appreciate that, Allison. I think it's been a really nice transition for me to learn about this business, to understand how clients need to be able to tell these stories, and really go, as you say, very much beyond kind of the superficial narrative of we're coming here to extract minerals or create a product or deliver some sort of service. It's much more than that. It's companies who make these strategic investments in various parts of the world are doing so as a major decision, and that affects communities, that affects livelihoods. And those should be understood, spoken about, making sure that as a company that comes to a certain locality to perhaps mine and extract particular products, minerals, ores, whatever it may be, that they're actually serving their communities, that they're actually in employing jobs, they're creating tax revenues, they're creating salary and benefits for the local folks, but they're also creating economic impact. That is not just a singular point, because ultimately that money, that salary is then going to get redeployed to the local coffee shop, to the restaurateurs, the grocery stores, and that itself is going to create economic value. And there's a virtuous circle with all of this that also can be missed. And we are excited to be able to help quantify those things and help set a baseline, frankly, for an organization. And this is the really interesting part: when there are policy changes that may impact a company's ability to provide a service or be in a location, those have implications to the economic impact or the economic value. And so, what we can also do, and we also work very closely with clients on, is not only quantifying the economic impact, but also quantifying the impact of potential policy change. That may be a taxation or a tariff, that may be a change in labor laws. All of these things have implications to the ability of an organization to provide the capabilities that it does. And when you have that baseline, that health check, if you will, of the economic value that you're providing, once you do that, these policy changes, the implications of these policy changes can be quantified as well. And that creates a conversation point for officials who are really considering these policy changes.
And I would stretch that even more from the mining company point of view, not just policy changes at the local, national, federal level, but for example, if a mine moves into closure or wants to understand the impact of the mine closure, that sounds like a really key point as well, to view that decision from this perspective of the communities around and to understand what that closure could mean from an economic sense. Is that something, do you think, that could apply here?
100%. I mean, I think that is exactly, forget the policy changes, but actual business decisions. We're going to make a strategic investment or we're going to remove a strategic investment. Certainly, it's almost like level one type of impact that we could measure and quantify and help an organization really and talk about that as well, or at least understand that. And so that's certainly a part of our value proposition. And clients certainly to do these
You know,
things.
you once shared with me an anecdote, and I'll make it neutral because it's one of your clients, but I thought it was just so interesting that relates back to as well mining, is that the impact isn't necessarily just in that immediate tangible community. So if I recall the anecdote correctly, you were talking about one of your clients who has a big place where people come from all over the world and they buy things. And this place is on one end of the US. And it turns out that the ice cream that's sold in this place comes from a small community very far away in the US from this place. And that to me was so interesting that I don't think that people really associate. Like, I'm going to this place to enjoy with my family, to do tourism. And I don't think, if for whatever reason your client changes the ice cream vendor, that is going to have a significant impact on this one little community 1,000 miles away. And that you have the data to show that.
We live in a world where supply chains are so integrated, but also so knowable that we can quickly understand and ascertain these impacts. Although a business may operate in a certain jurisdiction or a certain area, it draws upon resources and people, frankly, that may come from many other places to serve its products, to serve its clients, its customers. And we have mechanisms and methods to understand those things with the data we source and with the model that we have to bring these real important insights into kind of clear picture, so that when these companies engage with officials around potential policy change that they can say, hey, look, this is going to have a real impact in your neighborhood. Although you don't think we operate here, this organization's supply chain draws from your community. You are going to be affected, and you should understand that before you make a decision. And those insights are invaluable.
I mean, I'm already thinking the US is on my head right now because I'm sitting in Washington. There's a lot going on in the world. But to me, in a country as large as the US, also there's a lot going on in a number of other mining jurisdictions, say Canada or a number of other countries. Anyway, that also means, for example, a mining project, say in Arizona or Nevada or what have you, if you had the information that you can produce, you could find unlikely supporters in, say, Maine or
Yes,
Massachusetts. You could really tie and say, if this mining project doesn't continue or doesn't expand or doesn't continue to provide this economic benefit, I'm just using completely fictitious example, but this little community in Ohio could go under. That's
that's
really interesting. That could change your dynamic and your understanding of geopolitical risk.
That's right. And they're more often than not uncovered insights that actually change how business is done. And what you described it within the US thing, but as you I'm sure understand, supply chains are now fully global, and manufacturers of major technology equipment around the world now rely on supply chains that come in from all over the world. That interconnectedness is also super important. It's just really changing how people think about their businesses, not which have traditionally focused primarily on financial risks and at some cursory level on geopolitical risks, now to something much more interesting and deep.
And what I think is interesting and deep is that you provide that traceability and that focus that this product comes from here. And you can put that on an actual map and then overlay the value, not just on a spreadsheet, but in a physical place. I find that's a very good dimension that often is not taken into account when evaluating billion-dollar mining projects.
Yeah, we don't leave much to chance or choice. We really want to be very specific around how people understand the geographical implication, business line implication to the decisions that they're making.
So, what's often misunderstood about your role when you're working with clients? You're trying to do this work. They've obviously signed up to do this work with you. Do you ever find moments where there's a clear misalignment of expectations and you find yourself really misunderstood?
It does happen from time to time, and not to miss the point, we are providing a service that has an element of what I'll call estimation to it. And so we are not accountants where we're ticking and tying every dollar that comes in or every dollar that goes out. Our clients really want to have a general understanding of the impact that they're making. And now, to be clear, our estimations are based on very specific data, very defensible data. But if the winds kind of push a business in a slightly different direction than ultimately we may have quantified, it sometimes causes some questions. But more often than not, our clients understand the work that we're doing and understand that we're providing narratives.
So I want to back up a bit because I just love hearing you talk about your work. I can hear the passion that you talk about this work. I will say you weren't as passionate, not to say it wasn't a positive experience early on. You weren't as passionate talking about mortgage finance, but you've gotten today to talk about this work. Can we go back to earlier in your career and you were telling us about this journey? You said already you've always had this interest on how this skill and how this knowledge can help the world. You sit on the board of two nonprofits. What was the moment or moments when you realized that this is your calling, this is your career path?
Yeah, it's really about this making business work for society. Businesses have always struggled with the intersectionality of their dual mission, which is certainly in the service of their primary stakeholders, which are typically their shareholders, but also making sure that they are good stewards of their shareholder and their reputation by ensuring they're operating effectively and appropriately in the communities in which they do. But I wanted to bring some quantitative rigor to that question. What we want to bring is analytical rigor to some of these questions. And someone who's built their life and their career in the search of deep analytics and quantification of really, really hard questions, it was the perfect place for me to kind of come here and bring some of that thinking and that mindset of how can an analysis of this type really help companies understand the impact that they're making. And so it was a perfect intersection for me to bring some of what I've done to, where I'm headed in my life.
Okay, but now I got to ask, where does the curiosity to bring this rigor come from? You started off wanting to focus, bringing financial rigor, bringing analytics. I assume you studied something of the like. Was it always just when you were little, you always just knew one plus one was two and that equation was too easy? So you just kept digging, or was there something more broader than that?
What I realized when I was early in my career is that talking about something doesn't really matter. You have to prove it. And the best proofs come from people who can show me the numbers and show me this is the point. And so I was good enough, I'll call it, at the math and the hard math, even to really know that the proof that everybody was looking in the pudding was more often baked in numbers. And so I learned it. I had to do it and I got good at it. And now that I got good at it, I've been able to apply it in a way that I think really touches my heart a little bit more deeply than the very interesting, but probably sometimes less exciting to me in my old space of mortgage finance. So it's a little bit of a transition, but I think knowing the numbers has always been important. I can't give you any more depth than that, but I think it's been something that I feel has been an important feature.
I like that though. I like that. Talking doesn't matter. You have to prove it. I think there's a lot there that is relevant in a number of circumstances where just telling someone this is how it's going to be, they're just supposed to take your word for it. And in this podcast and in my work, I dig a lot into what constitutes company community trust. And I haven't focused on this exact aspect yet in terms of when you do share information, how do you prove that? And how do you show the transparency and robustness of the process that you went through to demonstrate that this is accurate information? I think there's a lot there.
Yeah, coming back to what we were speaking about a little while ago, which is, and kind of bring it also back to mining, as a potential mining company is seeking to make a strategic investment in a particular community, going to those community leaders, going to that community directly with real quantification of we're here. And although you may not understand why we're here, or you may be against our presence here, very much keep in mind that we aim to make this economic benefit for your community, and being able to talk about that with real numbers, not just stories or just a trust us, we'll be good local citizens to you, is never enough. Coming into it with, we're going to create 650 jobs, $22 million in taxable revenue in the first year and 75 million over the next 3 years. Like, those types of numbers matter to people, and it matters to officials, it matters to leaders, but it matters to the citizens. And so companies are having to have these conversations at that level, and having real numbers to talk to it really changes the conversation.
So, what emerging issues should the mining industry be more focused on, do you think?
I think right now, obviously, the geopolitical landscape and the changes in the economic policy landscape is high on mind for many of our clients who really are trying to make sense of how to make strategic decisions and deploy investment capital and in which jurisdictions, and ensure that they can do the what if analysis of what happens if this particular policy gets instantiated. And we are really helping these organizations unpack that, understand it, quantify it, and then potentially make these decisions with uncertain information. In addition, labor laws are changing quite rapidly as well. And so as labor laws change, certainly here in the US, but in other parts of the world, those are also things that need to be understood. What are the implications to labor availability, to labor costs, and how is that changing the strategic investment decision process and mindset?
When you say that labor laws change, for example, what type of change are you talking about?
Yeah, perhaps I'm speaking in code there, but I think very much here in the US, as immigration laws are changing and access to immigrant labor changes over time. And this is a pendulum that has swung back and forth over many years, but I feel like is going in a very singular direction right now and will continue to for some time, is changing how the US can source labor at a certain cost with certain access points. And so This is very high on the minds of many different industries. Certainly mining will be one of them, but agriculture is another, and certainly hospitality is another area where we're really thinking about these things. But our clients want to know, if this happens, then this is the implication. And if that happens, this is the implication. That scenario analysis informs their decision making.
That's interesting. I mean, I think it does apply to mining because I know a number of countries are having similar policy discussions and don't realize. And you, with a data approach, can help countries realize that if certain specialized labor or pools of labor for which the mining industry depends entirely on a global labor and is so specialized in certain aspects that you really do have to convince somebody from halfway around the world to come live wherever your mining project is for a few years. And if that person cannot, then that can have real impacts on your project and your ability to develop it. So that is a really interesting emerging issue I did not think about. I always end my sessions with the similar question. So curious for you, because you are coming from such a different area than a number of my guests. What advice do you have for others in your field to succeed?
I think the most important feature of my career has been constantly being a student of the market. It was something that was frankly drilled into me when I was in my years at Blackrock, where we were constantly encouraged, if not even more fully and explicitly driven, to really become students of anything that it is you're doing. So, really staying informed about what's happening in the marketplace, what's happening in the policy world, and what's happening in the industry that you're in. And being a student of the market in that sense really changes your ability to grow in your field, to demonstrate relevance and an understanding, and frankly, a passion for what it is you're doing by continuing to be a student of the market. And so I have really enjoyed learning about the mortgage finance stuff that I did early in my career, the technology aspects of my career, but now more and more as I'm bringing my focus into helping quantify the impact of companies and investors in certain communities. Now I'm totally and utterly focused on the implications of geopolitical risk and economic policy risk on strategic decision making. And that's been so much fun. So be a student, constantly learn, constantly listen, and constantly ask questions, and good things will happen.
That's good advice, I think, for any sector. My first master's degree is in economics, and I always see the world through that lens of, people can toss off saying, oh, it's just the economics. It's not really what people want to do or somehow otherwise qualify it. But to me, it's a pretty good alignment of people's motivations and understanding the world. I mean, it is a social science. And so I'm fascinated always by market dynamics and that representation of people's perspectives. But anyway, so I share the curiosity. And thank you very much for joining us on the podcast. I learned a lot during this discussion and really enjoyed speaking with you.
Well, it was a great pleasure. And Allison, you've been a tremendous partner to us. So we are super excited about getting the opportunity to speak to your audience and your listeners. We at Steward Redqueen are doing good work, and we hope to continue to do so, and are excited about what the future holds and in the mining industry, and how we can potentially serve more in that community.
Thank you for joining us. If you like what you heard, please like, provide a 5-star review, and amplify.